All right, good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today. Just for your awareness, if you did not see the notification when you joined the meeting, this meeting is being recorded or this presentation is being recorded, and a copy of the presentation and the video will be posted on the project webpage to be made available to anyone who's not able to attend one of these sessions. So this afternoon, we are going to talk through the Historic Overlay District Design Guideline Update project, which is taking place this summer. My name is Daniel White. I'm a Heritage Resources Planner in the Department of Planning and Development, and I am also the Architectural Review Board Administrator. Also on the call today, we have Jonathan Kaplan, who is a Heritage Resources Planner and ARB support. So for the agenda for today, I just did introductions. We're going to go through the presentation, which is broken out into 3 different modules, which will discuss an overview of the project background and the timeline so far. Next, we'll discuss the ARB application and review process. And lastly, I will cover the updated documents and their structure. After the presentation, I'll open the floor to any questions or comments from the audience. And at that time, I'll unmute the mics for everyone in the room. That's just set that way so that we don't have any noise interruptions before we're ready for them. If you do have a question, you can raise your hand using the function at the top of the screen, and the chat is also available. You can type a question in and I can see it as it pops up. So as I said, the first part of this presentation will focus on the project background and the previously completed tasks. In 1969, the Board of Supervisors amended the county's zoning ordinance to create historic overlay districts and provide regulations over and above the regular zoning to better protect those unique areas, sites, and buildings that are of special architectural, historic, cultural, or archaeological significance to local residents and visitors. Since 1969, the board has established 15 HODs, which you can see listed on the screen. The Lorton Laurel Hill Memorandum of Agreement Eligible District, which was established in 2001, is treated like an HOD, and projects in the district are subject to ARB review. Every HOD was established with a district-specific design guideline document, many of which are unchanged since they were first adopted. Design guidelines are a requirement in the zoning ordinance. Section 3101 of the ordinance states that the ARB will adopt guidelines based on specific standards. The standards identified and listed in the ordinance follow those found in the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the treatment of historic properties. This design guidelines project, which traces to 2016, was undertaken to create more detailed guidelines documents for all HODs while simultaneously making the documents easier to use. In fall of 2019, a contract was awarded to the project consultant, EHT Traceries. The consultant began work on the project in January of 2020 and completed drafts of the updated 13 district-specific documents and the newly created general document by September of 2021. 2 HODs were established during this project, the Wellington at River Farm HOD in 2021 and the Holland Hills HOD in 2022. Both new HODs were established with district-specific design guidelines, also written by EHT Traceries and adopted by the ARB. The project was put on hold due to staffing transitions after early 2022 and picked back up in the fall of 2023. All documents created during this project will be presented to the ARB for adoption this fall. Once adopted, the documents will be available for use by applicants and design and construction professionals during the design phase of a project, and will be used by county staff and ARB members during the ARB application and review process. I'm going to stop at a few key dates on the timeline shown on the previous slide, which is copied to the bottom of the next several slides. In October of 2016, the ARB held a facilitated meeting to discuss updating the existing design guidelines documents. In addition to updating all existing district-specific guidelines, the ARB also discussed the need for creating an overarching design guidelines document. At this meeting, the ARB identified and agreed upon architectural and planning principles to be included in the updated documents. Those are shown on the screen, and a revised and refined list of these principles is included in all draft documents that are open for public review right now. Next in the timeline, we jump to the January 2020 ARB meeting when the EHT traceries team kicked off the project. The project goals from the beginning were to create user-friendly guidelines, provide guidance for applicants, staff, and the ARB for the review of structures of historical significance, to develop a new overarching design guidelines document, and to revise the existing district-specific guideline documents for 13 HODs. By September of 2020, the EHT traceries team had completed all site visits and background research and had also created outlines of the document templates. By September of 2021, drafts for the new overall document and the updated district-specific documents were completed. The consultant also created the design guidelines for Wellington at River Farm and the Holland Hills HODs. As I said, both HOD studies for these districts were authorized by the Board of Supervisors after the original contract for the project was awarded. After March 2022, the project was essentially put on ice. DPD staff picked up the project in fall of 2023 and reviewed the drafts completed in September of 2021. Following staff review, EHT traceries made edits and prepared the drafts for public comment. Following the public engagement period and another round of edits, revised drafts will be presented to the ARB for adoption. We are targeting fall 2024 for this presentation. Next, we're going to walk through the ARB application and review process. The ARB has purview over any project in an HOD with exterior work which requires a county permit. ARB review is not required for projects which only feature interior work. The chart on the screen shows common examples of when building permits are and are not required. These are only examples and do not account for every permit type or project. If you are unsure if your project requires a permit, you should contact Land Development Services. If you are unsure if ARB review is required for your project, you should contact the ARB administrator. The ARB conducts two types of review: informal or workshop sessions and formal or action items. At informal workshop sessions, the ARB reviews development concepts or proposals and gives general guidance. The only requirement to participate in an informal review is to provide supporting materials that clearly present the project idea, whether in written form, drawings, or other graphic form. Staff generally recommend appearing first at a workshop session before coming to the ARB as an action item. Informal workshop sessions do not result in formal approval or recommendation for approval by the ARB. During a formal review, an applicant presents a fully developed and detailed proposal, and the ARB evaluates the proposed project for compatibility with the HOD. Successful projects will protect the historic and contributing properties and the overall visual character of the HOD. In addition to exterior architectural design elements, the ARB reviews plans for site design, grading, landscaping, outdoor lighting, signage, and other site features. When the formal review of each element is completed, the ARB will take action. The ARB will either approve or recommend approval depending on the related permit application type. ARB review and recommendation is required for zoning applications, site plans, subdivision plans, grading plans, and sports illumination plans and HODs. ARB review and approval is required for building permits, sign permits, and demolition permits. ARB approval or recommendation of approval is required before the related building permit can be issued. All applications to appear before the ARB must be submitted electronically through the county's Planning and Land Use System, or PLUS, application portal. Staff recommends submitting as much information as possible about a project, including current photographs of the property and buildings to show site conditions, views to or from contributing resources, architectural drawings, site plans, landscape plans, and information about materials and manufacturers' cut sheets as appropriate. Currently, all ARB applications for action are due at least 2 weeks before the regularly scheduled monthly meeting to provide the ARB members sufficient time to review the submission materials. Applications for workshop sessions are due at least 1 week before the regularly scheduled monthly meeting. Projects in the Lorton-Laurel Hill MOA eligible district require an earlier submission to comply with the review process stipulated in the Memorandum of Agreement. All ARB applications for action in the MOA area must be submitted more than 30 days prior to the regularly scheduled meeting. Workshop applications in Lorton must only adhere to the 1-week deadline. The ARB regularly meets on the second Thursday of the month. The ARB holds the following Monday in the event a special meeting must be held to accommodate the caseload for any given month. For example, applications for action at the September 12th meeting will be due by August 29th. Workshop applications will be due by September 5th. ARB approval does not replace the need to secure necessary county permits. Following ARB approval or recommendation of approval, applicants will receive an ARB approval letter and ARB approved stamped application package. A copy of the approval letter and stamp package should accompany all permit applications as supporting documentation. Heritage Resources staff within the Department of Planning and Development will review the related permit application materials for conformance with ARB approval. Now we are going to talk about the updated design guidelines documents. This project includes updates to 13 district-specific design guidelines and the creation of a new general design guidelines document. The Wellington at River Farm and Holland Hills HODs were established in 2021 and 2022, respectively. Both HODs were established with district-specific design guidelines, which were not updated as part of this project. The updated district documents include maps, photographs, histories of the HOD and its contributing or historic resources, and recommendations for appropriate treatments based on project type. The general design guidelines document, which is applicable to all current and future HODs or properties under ARB purview, contains similar information. The design guidelines contain guidance and recommendations based on historic preservation, standard practices and treatments, the Secretary of Interior's standards for the treatment of historic properties, and the design principles identified by the ARB. As a reminder, Section 3101 of the zoning ordinance states that the ARB will adopt design guidelines for use in reviewing applications. The standards identified and listed in Section 3101 of the zoning ordinance follow those found in the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the treatment of historic properties. The design guidelines are just that, guidelines and recommendations. They are not requirements, and there is no one-size-fits-all approach for heritage resources. So, there is room for flexibility when applying the recommended treatments in the development and review of projects and HODs. Now, let's discuss the structure of the General Design Guidelines document. The document is organized into the 5 sections shown on the screen. Chapters 1 and 2 provide background information about HODs, the ARB, and the ARB review process. Chapter 3 contains guidance on historic preservation, project planning, and design principles and guidelines utilized by the ARB while reviewing applications. Chapter 4 features design guidelines organized into 3 sections. The first is preserving architectural character, which is focused on the preservation and rehabilitation of existing buildings. The second is architectural compatibility and neighborhood cohesion, which is focused on new construction and new additions. Third is preserving setting, which is focused on landscape, streetscape, and archaeology guidelines. The guidelines in chapters 3 and 4 include a list of recommended or not recommended approaches based on historic preservation treatments and practices. The appendices feature contact information for reference agencies, a glossary, and links to additional resources. Chapter 3 of the General Design Guidelines document features recommendations organized by the design principles, which were first identified by the ARB in 2016. These principles include setback and site relationship, orientation, height and scale, proportion, rhythm, symmetry and balance, massing and building form, roof form and materials, door and window types and patterns, materials, textures and colors, and details and ornamentation. The example on the screen comes from the page for massing and building form. The page contains a definition of the principle, guidelines for the recommended or not recommended treatments, and an illustration explaining the principle. A recommended treatment would be that additions to historic or contributing buildings be deferential to the historic building form. A treatment that is not recommended would be altering an existing building with an oversized addition. As I said earlier, Chapter 4 of the General Design Guidelines is organized into 3 sections: preserving architectural character, architectural compatibility and neighborhood cohesion, and preserving setting. This example on the screen for foundations is found in the Preserving Architectural Character section, which is focused on the preservation and rehabilitation of existing buildings. The page discussing foundations includes recommendations for treatments when a project may affect or alter a building foundation that is constructed of historic material. All subsections in Chapter 4 feature guidelines or recommendations organized by the design principles found in Chapter 3 or by common building elements or features. Other examples of building elements include walls and exterior cladding, roofs, and mechanical systems. The district-specific documents sometimes feature information like that found in the general design guidelines. In most cases, they contain recommendations for appropriate treatments that are specifically applicable to that HOD. Chapters 1, 2, and 3 provide background information about how the specific HOD, how to use the guidelines, an inventory of its resources, and a summary of district character. Chapter 4 contains design guidelines specific to that HOD, its character-defining features, and significant resources. All guidelines incorporate the design principles and the building elements or features introduced in the General Design Guidelines document. This map on the screen is from the Huntley HOD district-specific document, and it shows the district boundary, the identified significant resources, and the classifications of those resources, either historic, contributing, or non-contributing properties. Once the updated documents are adopted by the ARB, they will replace the existing versions on the webpage. If you have never visited the ARB webpage before, there is a landing page for all HODs, and each district has its own page with a synopsis, a copy of the report establishing the HOD, and the currently adopted design guidelines. Staff recommend reviewing both the general document and the district-specific document that applies to your HOD before beginning the design phase of your project. This review of the documents will help ensure your proposal aligns with the recommendations made for your HOD. Staff will be using the documents to process your application, and the ARB will use the documents to evaluate your proposal before taking action. Before we end this presentation, I'd like to recap the goals of this project that were identified back in January of 2020 when the project started. The goals were to create user-friendly guidelines, provide guidance for applicants, staff, and ARB for review of structures of historical significance, develop a new overarching design guidelines document, and to revise the existing district-specific design guidelines documents for 13 HODs. In addition to hosting information sessions to discuss the project and the ARB review process, we are also asking for your feedback on the updated documents and how successfully we have met these goals. You can respond and share your feedback in a variety of ways. First, if you have not done so already, I would recommend visiting the project webpage and reviewing the draft documents. A link of the webpage is on the next slide and will be posted in this chat. After reviewing the drafts, we want to hear your thoughts. You can visit the online feedback and comment portal linked on the webpage, or you can email me directly. Thank you for attending today and for taking the time to participate in this session and review the draft documents. Your feedback and comments are appreciated and essential to this process.